Is this something that you've been thinking about for a long time, or did it just kind of click one day like, this is something I should address?
That's an excellent question. So why didn't we do it sooner?
Yeah.
We still have a lot of new things that we want to develop. So we have to do this in an evolutionary fashion. We can't just, big bang and have everything hit all at once. So the first thing we wanted to do was make the axle lighter. And so that's kind of what the XD was all about. And so we developed the XD housing, wanted to reduce weight and increase strength. And so we did that. And we did that by making a completely new casting, having bigger tube assemblies. Then we kind of moved ourselves out to the wheel end assembly because, well, now that we have this bigger, stronger housing and a bigger gear, aren't people going to want to push that a little further? You bet they are. And so being able to have higher shaft strength and also better tire support for bigger tires with less stress and reduce even more weight was a key goal.
When Cindy and I got a call from Dynatrac to ask if they could use one of our JKs to help develop an all-new version of their awesome XD60 front axle, it didn't take much to convince us to say yes, especially being that we'd get a chance to cover it and right from the very first measurements.
JK that has a double throwdown kit had a typical tire stance, and we wanted to maintain that for your car. And so to do that with the deep backspace wheels, we had to make the axle itself wider. So if you can kind of picture the knuckles moving out, but the tire center line staying right where it was, the benefit of that is it works with the double throwdown suspension, but it has the sharply reduced scrub radius and the tight turning capability that the new wheel end gives you. So this is an assembly of the 1550 wheel end. This line here is what's called steering axis inclination. So this is a center line, goes right between the two ball joints. That is the axis about which the wheel pivots around. So this is the point at which scrub radius is 0. So this distance is actually our scrub radius. And our scrub radius with the 5.5 inch backspace wheel is under 1 inch, very small. If I had a 3.5 inch backspace wheel, which would push the wheel and tire out 2 more inches, I'd have almost 3 inches of scrub radius. That's a big change. The tight scrub radius has a few more benefits. So it puts less stress on ball joint parts, it puts less stress on wheel bearings. The other thing is that when you have a long scrub radius, the tires are constantly trying to climb together. So you've probably seen videos of cars that are trying to climb an obstacle, and you can see the tires as they're gripping, they're turning into the center of one another. So that's because the tire is so far out, it's climbing into itself to the center of the car. With the low scrub radius, the tire's pulling straight. You can see these are dramatically different parts, right? One is made of a military grade aluminum. In fact, this is very expensive aluminum. It is a casting. There's only 2 foundries in the United States that are capable of making this quality material. It's already been used in military applications for steering knuckles, and of course we designed it specifically for aluminum. This is a stock knuckle, for JK, as you can see, pretty simple. They both have steering arms on top. They're cast in, as you can see. It's part of the knuckle, nothing bolts on. Of course, you can see it's made in USA, as is everything that we make at Dynatrac. Okay, so to compare the new 1550 knuckle to our Pro 60 knuckle, which we've had out for a really long time, you can see that the 1550 knuckle is taller. And that's because the bigger axle joints need more swing, so we had to move the ball joints out to give us that room. That longer stance also gives a lot more support, so the ball joints have more leverage on the tire. The spindle mounting bore is also a lot smaller because this was originally designed just to handle 1480 series Dana 60 U-joints, whereas this is designed to handle much larger joints. The 1550 knuckle can take a bigger ball joint set than the old Pro 60 knuckle. This part is also about 8 pounds lighter than this here, so that's 16 pounds right there in weight savings on knuckles. So that's considerable. And it's stronger, so it's better, stronger, and lighter.
My name's Matt Green. I've been working for Dynatrac for almost 10 years. Started as a welder, worked my way into machinist. For the XD60s, we run 3 3/4 quarter wall. So I'll cut your tube lengths and machine them for your end forgings and your seal press and comes and fit. Push them all together.
This is where it all begins. Tubes cut down to size, they can now be set up and have their ends turned for proper fitment. After finishing up the pumpkin side, the tube is flipped so that it can be turned for the end forging.
Done.
Moving over to the press, Eli will install seal housings into the tubes. XD60 end forgings can now be pressed onto the tubes. For added strength, the end forgings will need to be welded in place. Both axle tubes can now be pressed into the differential housing. The axle housing will now be set up on a jig to have mounting brackets welded onto it. For our purposes, this will include brackets for our EVO Double Throw Down coilover system.
I want to show you a few of the features of the new XD housing. So we did a number of things differently when we redesigned the ProRock and it became the ProRock XD. There's a lot of little features in here that give it a lot more rigidity. So there's a lot more stiffness to prevent it from flexing this way and this way. Some of those features are easy to see, like there's some ribs up here and down here. Some of them are a little more subtle. We also were a lot more careful about where we removed material to get the weight out of it, but we were able to get a lot of weight out of it. The features that pump oil up into the upper pinion bearings have also been improved so that we're getting a greater volume of oil. It still supports a dual sump high volume setup, but we've also wanted to add more ability to pump oil up to the pinion bearings. All right, let's take a look at some of the external features of the ProRock XD. The JK upper control arm mount position is in the correct location. It's part of the casting. The new positions for the selectable locker connection point, so this can be for electric or for air, and the hose comes out laterally so it can curve up into the body. Same thing with the vent hose. The vent hose goes to the rear so it can curve up into the body. Here is an extra port to add oil. This allows you to add oil individually to the upper pinion sump, which is separate from the lower sump. The advantage of that is that there's always going to be oil lubricating the pinion bearings, even if it sits for a long time or is exposed to extreme angles. Okay, so here's what the diff cover looks like on the new XD60. So we wanted to have much more firm contact here, so we want to eliminate the silicone and gaskets that would allow the two surfaces to shuffle. We also added an O-ring seal so that you can take the cover off, put it back on, all you can do is wipe it off and it won't leak, so it's reusable. The other thing we did was we increased the size of the cover screws. So these are 7/16 14 grade 9s. This is a 3/8 16 grade 5. So I can torque this screw to 85 pound-feet and get a lot of clamping force around this cover. That gives us a lot more rigidity for the housing that the cover is providing, in addition to the improvements in the housing. In order to give the ring and pinion more support, we also need to increase the bearing size. So this is a typical inner pinion bearing for an ordinary Dana 60 or our earlier generation ProRock 60. This is the inner pinion bearing we have for the XD60. You can see there's obviously a big difference between these two. This is a much larger bearing, and giving the pinion head more support is critical to reducing deflection and increasing gear strength. In addition to giving the pinion more support, we wanted to give the carrier more support. The carrier holds the ring gear in place and keeps the ring gear rotating in the right plane to mate with the pinion gear. So this is a standard carrier bearing for a Dana 60 and our earlier ProRock 60. This is the same carrier bearing we use in our ProRock 80, and this is what we use in the XD60.
Okay, let's get started. So I'm gonna mount the gear first. I've already pressed the bearing on this.
With the XD60 axle housing completely assembled, Steve can now start the tedious process of installing and setting up its gears and locker. take several attempts to get things right, setup bearings and even a setup yoke are used to help move the process along.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install it, and I'm going to feel how the preload feels, and kind of listen to back and adjust off of what I think I need to do. 30, 40, 50, doing gears for a while.
Time to apply some marking compound and check the pattern of the gears. With everything looking good, it's time to remove the setup bearings and have new ones pressed on. After a final installation of the pinion, a preload check is performed to verify that it's still on. Before the differential housing can be sealed up, the ARB airline needs to be routed through the bulkhead. After checking the locker for leaks, the XD60 differential cover can now be installed.
Oh man, I love these.
Okay, so let's take a look at some ball joints. The ball joints for the 1550 wheel end are a larger set of ball joints than we've had for our typical Pro 60 wheel ends for all these years. The lower ball joints are the same for both the Pro 60 and for the 1550. These are very robust. These last a long time. They're rebuildable on the car. Once you press them into the knuckle, you don't have to press them out of the knuckle to rebuild them. You basically can take them apart, put new internals in there. There's stainless steel spherical bearings. It's a very strong part. Heat treated chrome moly stems. So we didn't need to do anything in the bottom. But in the top, we definitely wanted to make some improvements. So as you can see, the ball joint for the 1550 knuckle is larger both in the stem and in the body than the earlier Pro 60 knuckle. We did this because we actually designed the 1550 wheel end to handle higher gross axle weight ratings and also take a lot more abuse. We really saw the 1550 wheel end being used on almost exclusively vehicles with larger tires, higher weights, and adding a lot more torque and braking capacity. So we wanted a stronger upper ball joint to give that more toughness and also longer lasting. All right, so I thought since the size of the U-joints in the shafts and the big yokes on the shafts are something that's of value on the new wheel end, I wanted to show you the difference between our Pro 60 wheel end and the new 1550 series so you get an idea of the size of the two different pieces. So what we have right here in the foreground is a 1480 series. This is kind of typical of what you'd find in almost any Dana 60. Over here, this is the 1550 series. You can see the U-joint is a lot larger, the yoke is a lot larger, and the yoke has also been carefully crafted to give 50 degrees of turning capability out of this assembly. Obviously you can see there's a lot of strength in this 1550 wheel end, and there's also a lot of ability to turn sharply with this 1550 wheel end.
Hi, my name is Noah Corman. I work for Dynatrac, and today we're going to be installing the 1550 wheel assembly.
With the completed XD axle housing bolted onto Rubicat, the final pieces to finish things up can now be installed, and that would begin with the massive Pro 1550 steering knuckles. Making sure to apply silver anti-seize, the steel spindles are bolted onto the aluminum knuckles. The speed sensor is installed on a newly designed fixed mount on the knuckle. The hub can now be installed onto the spindle. With the hubs in place, the Dynalocks can now be assembled. The installation of rotors and brake calipers bring us one step closer to being done. Finally, an all-new heavy-duty Dynatrac tie rod is installed to complete the XD60.
It's good to go, and that's our 1550 wheel assembly.
So we know that much of the Dynatrac XD60 has been designed to be bigger, stronger, and lighter, but what we really wanted to know was how much of an improvement would we see with the modifications that were specifically made for Rubicat. By going 72.5 inches wide, Rubicat could now run a set of trail-ready beadlock wheels that have 5.5 inches of back spacing, and do so while still being able to maintain the exact same stance she had before and without any rubbing issues of her EVO Double Throw Down coilover system. Of course, running a greater amount of back spacing also means that the center line of her wheels would be pulled inward, and that provides greater ball joint protection and reduced stress on her wheel bearings and tie rod. To help demonstrate the improvements made in our ability to steer, we decided to do a side-by-side test of Rubicat with her new XD60 front axle and Moby, who's still running a standard 68.5-inch Pro Rock 60, Pro 60 steering knuckles, and wheels with 4 inches of back spacing. Standing in place and turning the steering wheel lock to lock, you can see that the tire prints left behind by Moby are clearly scrubbing in an arc and with a center point located outside of the tread. By comparison, the prints left behind by Rubicat look more like they are spinning in place and around a center point located inside the tread. This rotation, or pivoting, is the result of improved scrub radius that the Pro 1550 steering knuckle provides. In addition to improved scrub radius, the 1550 wheel ends also offer a measurable improvement in steering angle. As you can see in this test, Rubicat has a curb-to-curb turning radius that measures 45.3 feet and can easily drive in a circle between these two planters. Running Pro 60 steering knuckles, Moby has a curb-to-curb turning radius of 50.7 feet and was unable to complete a circle between the planters. The 72.5-inch Dynatrac XD60, bigger, stronger, lighter, and I might add, more agile too.